Okay.
So then I'm going to talk a little bit about relational expertise. Some time ago, my colleague Harry Galishan and I mentioned, actually, I think it was in 1990, 91, something like that. We wrote an article called "The Client is the Expert."
I remember that article.
You remember that article? Yes.
Great article.
Well, thank you. So we had been talking about this idea, and we'd mentioned it in other articles, but we'd never devoted an article to it. So we did. And what we meant by the client is the expert, and what we tried to explicate in our paper was that we do think the client comes with their local knowledge, and that he or she or they are the experts on their own lives, that we are not the experts on their lives, and that we can never be. Well, we got lots of what's called pushback on that, lots of criticism. How can you say the client is the expert and that you don't have any expertise? How can you fool yourself? How can you try to fool the client in that way? And so we were terribly surprised, Shishawan, because we've never said that we didn't have any expertise or that we didn't want the client to think we had some expertise. What we were trying to do was to emphasize the expertise that the client brought on his or her own life. And thinking in terms of the client's an expert in the room, and we're an expert in the room, but we're experts on different things. They're the expert on their life, and I'm an expert on a particular way to invite conversations and invite people to engage with me as a conversational partner and to engage in mutual inquiry with me.
You know, that I read the article, and a lot of my colleagues, we also read the article, and we said, this is so cool. Client is expert, you know, such a sort of breaking something, you know. I mean, so it's just something I think that you are helping people to think about how we look at the client, because often before that we probably would see client as non-expert, which would influence how we are with them. So it's a historical, very important article.
Well, thank you. It certainly challenged the way that most of us think in terms of not often acknowledging or appreciating the expertise, the wisdom, the knowledge, the resources, the strengths, the talents that our clients bring with them, and the importance of being able to learn about that and be able to use that itself as a resource in the therapy in terms of developing something new and different related to what it is that they're seeking counseling or therapy for.
Yes.
So in my notes I say it's important to think that we are always outsiders who in a way invite ourselves into the other person's world.
Wow.
Even though they may have asked for an appointment, we are in a way the intruders who are trying not to be intrusive in their world. People often say, how can you say you're not an expert when you really are? Well, the way that I think about it is that the expertise that clients usually think we have is what I call culturally deemed or culturally given. In other words, our culture puts the therapist, the professional, whether it's a therapist, a coach, a consultant, a lawyer, a doctor, puts them in the position of being an expert and in the position of knowing the answer. And so the client comes to the therapist or the counselor, often much like someone brings a car to a mechanic, expecting the mechanic to fix the car and expecting the therapist to fix their broken heart or lost soul or whatever it might be that they're there for. So these are things I think as professionals we have participated in creating these ideas about us and what we do. I think that some of that begins to be minimized or dispelled somewhat by the way that collaborative practitioners begin to engage with the client in a way that has many subtle indications that their expertise is important and will be respected and honored.
I like that word of honor.
Honored, yeah. Okay. So the therapist's expertise is always there. It cannot be because of these broader cultural factors. Or, as you might say, the therapist could be thought of as in a position or power of authority. However, but in a collaborative practice, they're not there in a hierarchical manner. In other words, they're not here above the client, and it's not a dualistic relationship in which there's a wall or a boundary between them. It's a much more egalitarian way of being with each other. A Finnish colleague named Rakkonen, I'm going to read a quote that he said, and maybe you want to read it if you want to try to interpret it now into Chinese. He says, the risk of content expertise, he's referring to the expert carries all their pre-understandings forward. In other words, expert systems are created ahead of time.
Okay, so to kind of okay， 所以这里有老师的一个就是朋友啊说的就是内容就是有一种危险叫做内容的专业，就是专家啊带着原来的理解去往前走，也就是专家的系统是在见个案之前就被创造出来了。这个意思就是，好像当我们做专家的人或是做咨询的人，我们还没有跟个案工作，我们就以为我们已经知道内容，或是我们看了几个形容，比如说别人写的东西，我们就以为我们知道，所以这个叫危险，内容专业的危险。
It's a somewhat complex way of saying that if you think of yourself as an expert and you act as an expert, then you are participating in creating an expert non-expert system.
Yes.
Okay, let's see what else I have. Oh, we can move then to the next one, not knowing. No, not the next slide.
Here, yes, okay.
The next green.
Yes, yes.
Okay, let me move now, Shishuan, to not knowing. Not knowing is another one of those very controversial things that Harry Galicia and I began to write about. Not knowing does not refer to not knowing anything, either pretending or thinking. But not knowing refers to the way one thinks about the construction, the creation of knowledge. It refers to how one uses what knowledge they think they have, or another way of saying that is how one uses what you think you might know. And I really like that phrase, what you think you might know. And it has to do with the timing and the attitude or the manner in which you introduce your knowledge into a counseling, a therapy, a coaching, or consulting session. So, for example, that going back to the narrative fragments and people telling their story, let's say that I'm working with a couple and they're talking about their relationship and there's been some indiscretion to the relationship. Someone has had a relationship with someone else outside of that relationship. And that they're having a really difficult time with forgiving and forgetting. And this forgiving and forgetting becomes the theme of the therapy sessions. So let's say that I come into the therapy room with them in one session, having just read a research article on forgiving and forgetting in marital and partner indiscretion. I will wait till there's a pause in the conversation and I'll say something like, you know, while you were talking, and we all three know that forgiving and forgetting is a real theme, and there's a real stuckness in our therapy around it. And I just, between the last time we met and today, read a research article with couples on forgiving and forgetting. Now, I'm not sure whether this article relates to you or whether you think it will. And I'm just wondering, though, would you be interested in hearing about this article and what the researchers concluded from their research. And then I pay very careful attention to how they respond. They might shake their heads, both, yes, we want to hear about that, we need all the help we can get. Or one of them might say, yeah, and the other one might say, I don't believe in research at all. No, I don't want to hear about it. So I'll say, okay, let's put this over on the side, and I might come back to it later. Let's see. But I won't try to force it. I won't try to explore. Well, why don't you want to know about research? Why don't you trust research? I won't respond in that way. I'll just respect that there's a difference there. And since there's a difference there, let's just put this decision on hold for a moment. So it's real important, again, to keep in mind that you can never fully know another person. Remember the statue from Havana, Cuba, with the big empty spaces with the two people very engaged. No matter how close or intimate you are in your relationship, husband and wife, partner and partner, mother and daughter, father and son, you can never fully know another person. You can't get inside another person. It's totally impossible. You can always only make your best guesses, and you can only try to understand them as best you can.
I remember years ago when I first listened to what you said we could never understand someone. All we can do is to try. I thought that's very, very helpful, because most of us, we have been trained, we got to find out, we got to know. So we know. But your teaching is that we can never know. No matter how hard you do, you can never know. All you can do is try. Even we think we know, but no, you don't really know.
Or like I was mentioning earlier, you can think you know, and therefore you're asking questions or making comments to try to get the person to confirm your knowing.
Yes.
So this reminds me that I think often as therapists, counselors, coaches, consultants, etc., that we often try to understand another person and make sense of their lives or what they've said or what they're doing in their lives from our logic maps, from our sense-making maps. And I think that that's just a trap, because that's our interpretation of them. What I think is important is how can you understand the other person from their logic or sense-making map. And what I have found is that when you are in the process of doing that, when you can be curious about something that's so different or so foreign to you, or jars you to some great extent, that when you begin to have a different understanding of something, it's not that you will then agree with it or support it or condone it, but having a different sense, a different understanding of it, you don't have this same kind of what can sometimes be an oppositional force in regard to their story. In other words, you can relax a little bit. In other words, from their sense-making map, it makes sense. Okay, I think I understand that as best I can. And we go from here.
I think that sometimes that probably for some people, some clinician, how do you work from like, oh, I got to have my sense of map. I'm using my map to work with whoever comes to us. And now learning about collaborative, it's not about our map, it's their map. And how do you work with the logic of their map or their whatever that they...
And end up creating a map together. That works better for them.
Yes.
So thinking in terms of the map and also going back to the story ball, one of the things I often talk with my students about is it's like the therapist comes in the therapy room and they have a map. Okay, they have a map and they take this story ball from the person and they put it on this map and they roll it around. And okay, so over here it tells them what the problem is. It tells them what the solution should be over here. And then in between, it tells them the strategies, the skills and the techniques to get from the problem to the solution. So I say you can't go into the therapy room with a map like that. You can't create the definition of the problem. You can't create the solution. And you can't create the steps, or if you like the word strategies, for getting there. That's something that you want to do in conjunction, in collaboration with your client. Okay.
I'd like to say something in Chinese. 刚刚我想那个哈林老师提到，就是平常我们咨询师可能会倾向于我们的专业，然后我们用我们专业学到的东西作为一个地图的导览，然后来希望带着我们的个案咨客去往前走啊。但是在合作里面，我们咨询师的这个地图不是重点，我们需要去看看来访者他们的地图是什么，他们的地图的思维是什么，然后逐步的去跟他共同去创造在对话里带出来的图。我知道哈林老师讲的这些东西，目前大家听起来可能觉得就是一个概念，但是你慢慢的琢磨，慢慢的去体会。大家如果在做咨询，你就可以去问啊，我在做咨询的时候，我是用谁的地图啊？还是我希望跟对方共同去创造地图？那个哈林提供我们一些思路，让我们可以检视我们自己。I said that you are helping us to reflect upon how we use map. Like how we use our own map and how we give space for the client to be able to use their map, eventually kind of partnership together. So I said that maybe at this moment people are listening to what you talk. It's a concept, but it's really about thinking how they are in relationship with their own map as a clinician and how they might work with clients' map. So
I like that you said concept, because all of the things that I'm talking about here, the features of 7 action-orienting sensitivities, are concepts that are put into action, that are performed, that are lived, that the way you perform them, the way you act them, the way you live them is influenced by the relationship, it's influenced by the context, it's influenced by the agenda of why the two of you are together. And not only the person that you're working with's agenda, but the agenda of the broader context in which you work.
Yes.
So a moment ago you asked about being public.
Yes.
And I hope I wasn't rude when I said,
No.
do you mind if I come back to that later? So let me come back to it now, because I haven't forgotten.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So being public, Shishuan, has to do with being open, okay? Being open with your inner thoughts, your silent thoughts, being open as to where your questions and your comments come from, being open to being challenged by the other person. Now, in psychotherapy, a word that you often hear is transparency. So transparency has a long history, and it was first introduced in psychotherapy by Carl Rogers. And he talked about the importance of being transparent with your clients. And then later, it was picked up by feminist therapists who thought that it was very important to be transparent with your thoughts and with your beliefs and with your values. And I began to question the word transparent, because it often has the connotation that you can look into something or you can look through it, but that you can be the seer. And I don't think that we can look through another person, that we can look through their behaviors, or that we can look through their eyes. That we can only imagine what it is that they're talking about, and we can only be curious about that and continue to ask about it. And that when I am curious and when I ask about something, again, as I was talking about the example of the couple with infidelity or marital indiscretion and forgiving and forgetting, that I mentioned to them that this was an article that I had read recently, and it might be of interest to them, it might not. So I'm telling them why I introduced this into the session. In other words, I'm not introducing the content of the article. I'm just saying, this is something that I read that might be useful for us. It might not. So then I'll shift to mutually transforming. And this is something I think we often don't think about, but certainly collaborative dialogic practitioners always want to keep in mind that it's not that just the client is transforming or changing, but we as therapists are also. And I like to use the word transforming or transformation rather than change or changing, because somehow in the psychotherapy field, many of us have thought for years, and still do, that people change and that a therapist can change another person. In other words, that you change from this to this. It's almost like I'm kind of stretching this, but almost like a mechanical thing. It's like you make this kind of change, like a transformer. Those children's toys that you can move the parts around and they become something else. So I don't think of change as something that's unilateral or that's isolated, but it's something that we do together. In other words, we're mutually influencing, we're mutually transforming each other. Now, of course, the reason that the client's there is because they want something or someone or themselves to have some kind of change in their life. That's their idea about the solution to whatever their concern or misery or dilemma is. But it's also important for therapists to keep in mind that the client is influencing us just as we're influencing them. And this is also another part of being a reflective or reflexive practitioner in terms of learning from your practice. And how did this client influence me today? Or how did this series of 22 sessions with this client influence me? What might I have learned from this? How might I be different now? Or what are some possibilities for my being different with future clients?
As I listen to you, that it feels that change is more like a not in the relationship. It's like, okay, I'm going to find some way to change the client. Sort of like a one-way thing, and it feels like there's some hierarchy. But when you talk about mutually transforming, it feels like in relationship, and we are together. It's not about doing something to someone. It's about being with
and each influencing the other.
I haven't thought about the differences between change and mutually transforming. But today, as I listen to you, somehow I have this inner voices about, oh, wow, that's very different.
Well, certainly the ideas that I mentioned that come from social constructionism and postmodernism have influenced my idea of mutually transforming. But the first time that I really began to kind of step back and think about change was when I was studying family therapy at the very beginning that I was talking about earlier.
Yes.
That Harry Galishan was my supervisor, and I was meeting with him, and I was very frustrated with this mother in this therapy session, and she just wouldn't do what I wanted her to do. She wouldn't be the kind of mother I wanted her to be.
She won't change.
She wouldn't change. And so Harry said to me, Harleen, the one thing you need to keep in mind is that you cannot change another person. You can only change yourself. And it was like, at first I was kind of stunned and probably felt a little bit scolded, but then as I left that supervision session, I started thinking, I think there's really something here. I need to stop trying to change people in my life and just change the way that I am with them or the way that I think about them. And I think certainly carrying that over into my professional work has made my professional work I'll say much easier.
Easier.
Easier, because again, you're respecting on the client's expertise, and that if this is the way they want to live their life, this is important for them, then we should not interfere, or certainly I do not want to interfere.
Wow, that's a great story that you just shared.
Yeah. So yeah, I always smile when I think about Harry and all the things that I learned from him
Yes.
over the years.